Welcome to Ancient Mysteries. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we ask a question that challenges everything we think we know about our species. What if humans weren't simply a product of evolution? What if we were modified, engineered by someone else? It's a theory as old as myth, yet as modern as our latest breakthroughs in genetics. When we trace the code written into our DNA, do we find the fingerprint of nature, or something far more intelligent? For most of modern history, human origin stories have been divided between two major narratives, one rooted in spiritual tradition, the other in scientific theory. In one, humanity is the creation of divine beings. In the other, a product of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. But both explanations, for all their depth, leave behind a trail of unanswered questions. Gaps in our fossil record, sudden leaps in cognitive ability, and ancient texts that speak in strange, almost technical terms about the birth of mankind. The oldest known civilizations, Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, did not claim to have developed their knowledge slowly over time. Instead, they described it as a gift from gods who came from the heavens. In Sumerian cuneiform tablets, we find the story of the Anunnaki, sky beings who allegedly descended to Earth to mine gold, and finding the labor too great, created humans to serve them. According to these ancient texts, the gods fashioned mankind by mixing their own essence with that of the native hominids already inhabiting the land. These were not vague myths cloaked in symbolism. They contained technical descriptions of a creation process, references to the use of clay as a metaphor for genetic material, and even details about bloodlines, genetic purity, and divine manipulation. One Sumerian tablet describes the god Enki and the goddess Ninhursag working together to bind the essence of the gods with that of the man of the fields, resulting in the first Homo sapiens. Across the globe, similar stories echo through oral traditions. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the gods attempt to make man out of mud, then wood, then finally corn, the material said to give humans their true form and soul. The Aboriginal Dreamtime speaks of sky heroes who brought life to Earth and structured it through intentional design. In Africa, the Dogon people claim their ancestors were visited by beings from the star Sirius, who shared with them knowledge of DNA-like structures thousands of years before modern science confirmed their existence. What's striking is how many of these myths converge on the same concept, human beings as the product of deliberate creation. Not born, but built, not evolved, but enhanced. These aren't the tales of primitive minds grappling with their place in nature. They are detailed accounts passed down for generations, all pointing toward an origin marked by outside intervention. Meanwhile, mainstream science has struggled to explain certain leaps in human development. Between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, something happened that cannot be easily mapped. Brain volume increased rapidly. Language appeared. Art, music, mathematics, and symbolic behavior erupted seemingly from nowhere. Anthropologists call this the Great Leap Forward. But how exactly that leap occurred remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Is it possible that the myths were never myths at all? That our ancestors were recording in the language and metaphors available to them a story far stranger than we've dared to believe? If so, the line between ancient story and genetic science may be far thinner than we ever imagined. In recent decades, breakthroughs in genetic science have opened up doors once reserved for speculation. When scientists first mapped the human genome, they expected to find a logical blueprint shaped by millions of years of natural selection. Instead, they encountered something far more perplexing. Over 97% of our DNA, known as non-coding or junk DNA, does not seem to code for any known proteins. It doesn't appear to serve a functional purpose. To this day, researchers remain uncertain about what it does or why it's there. This vast portion of our genetic makeup has led some to propose radical possibilities. If DNA is a form of code, and if most of it appears to lack conventional structure or biological use, then what is it doing? Could it be a kind of dormant information, waiting to be activated? Or worse, was it deliberately inserted? Scientists at the Kazan Federal University in Russia have proposed that non-coding DNA may function like a biological internet, responding to frequencies and vibrations in ways not yet understood. Others have noted patterns in genetic sequences that resemble linguistic structures, with syntax and grammar, suggesting something closer to programming than biological accident. Then there are the anomalies. Specific genes found in humans, such as the FOXP2 gene associated with speech and language, appear to have undergone accelerated evolution with no clear transitional forms. This single change, occurring relatively late in human development, allowed for the complex vocal communication that defines modern language. It's as though a genetic switch was flipped. Some theorists point to the HARNF gene, active during the development of the human neocortex, which seems to have evolved 70 times faster than surrounding genes. Again, no intermediate stages, just sudden, rapid change. One of the most provocative discoveries involves chromosome 2. Unlike other primates who have 48 chromosomes, humans have 46. Chromosome 2 is unique because it appears to be the result of a head-to-head fusion of two ancestral chromosomes. The fusion site is precise, clean, and located in a region typically resistant to such natural recombination. More puzzling still, the telomeres, end caps of chromosomes, appear in the middle of the fused section, where they shouldn't be. It's an anomaly with no clear evolutionary precedent. Some geneticists argue this fusion was a fluke, a rare natural occurrence that just happened to result in the development of modern humans. But others question the likelihood of such a clean, functional fusion happening by chance, and wonder if the manipulation of chromosomes is not a new technology, but one that's been used before. In 2013, researchers studying mitochondrial DNA, the part inherited solely from the mother, found unusual patterns in its mutation rate that couldn't be explained by standard models. These deviations weren't errors or artifacts. They were persistent, deliberate-looking, and led some to question whether our maternal lineage had been altered in the distant past. Whether these anomalies are the result of natural phenomena, unknown scientific laws, or intentional design remains the subject of debate. But what's clear is that the story encoded in our DNA is not a straight line. It's a spiral of complexity filled with strange edits, unexplained insertions, and clues that suggest someone, or something, may have been writing long before we learned how to read. Academic consensus remains cautious, often dismissive of theories that challenge the established view of human evolution. For many researchers, the notion that humanity might have been genetically modified is not only unproven, it is regarded as unscientific, veering too closely to pseudoscience or myth. Evolution, they argue, does not require intervention. The fossil record, genetic drift, and natural selection account for the development of Homo sapiens without the need for outside influence. Yet, beneath the surface of academic rigidity lies a growing acknowledgement that certain anomalies defy neat categorization. Some scientists have begun to cautiously ask harder questions. Dr. Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the DNA double helix, famously suggested that life on Earth might have been seeded through a process he called directed panspermia, the intentional introduction of life by an advanced civilization. Though his proposal was speculative, it was rooted in his deep knowledge of molecular biology and the improbability, in his view, of DNA arising spontaneously under Earth's early conditions. This idea of directed panspermia straddles a fine line. On one side lies rigorous scientific inquiry into the origins of life. On the other, a landscape filled with ancient astronaut theories, suppressed knowledge, and controversial archaeology. While mainstream academics point to incremental mutations and environmental pressures, researchers outside the mainstream have drawn attention to early Homo sapiens appearing with fully formed capabilities, cognition, symbolism, ritual, and language, without the gradual development typically seen in evolutionary change. Debate also centers around the timelines themselves. Archaeological discoveries have begun to push back the dates for advanced human behavior. The site of Blombos Cave in South Africa, for example, revealed engraved ochre and shell beads dated to over 75,000 years ago, evidence of abstract thinking and cultural expression previously believed to have emerged only 40,000 years ago. The older these behaviors become, the harder it is to fit them into a neat evolutionary progression. But resistance to radical ideas often has less to do with evidence and more to do with reputation. Academia, like any institution, protects its boundaries. Those who suggest that humanity's origins might involve non-human intervention risk marginalization, loss of funding, or damage to their credibility. As a result, alternative interpretations of ancient DNA findings rarely receive institutional support, even when the anomalies themselves are well documented. Yet outside the ivory towers, public interest in this topic continues to grow. Genetic researchers unaffiliated with universities, independent archaeologists, and even whistleblowers from classified programs have stepped forward with claims that suggest a much more complex human origin story. Some allege that DNA studies have uncovered sequences with no known evolutionary origin, sequences that seem engineered. Others point to coded patterns, frequency-based properties, or embedded information that implies purpose rather than accident. Critics counter that these interpretations are built on coincidence, misunderstanding, or flawed data. But the conversation persists, often in quiet corners of conferences, online forums, or in private research groups willing to explore where traditional science fears to tread. The divide is not merely academic, it's philosophical. At its core lies the question of whether humanity is the result of chance or design. And if design, then who or what was the designer? Fringe theories, long dismissed by conventional science, have found new life in this space where genetic mystery meets ancient myth. Among the most provocative is the claim that ancient texts are not allegorical, but literal, historical records misinterpreted as spiritual metaphor. In this view, beings described as gods, angels, or watchers were not divine in a supernatural sense, but rather extraterrestrial entities possessing advanced biological knowledge. Their intervention, some believe, was not spiritual salvation, but bioengineering. The Book of Enoch, excluded from most biblical canons but revered in ancient Jewish mysticism, describes a race known as the Watchers, beings who descended from the heavens and took human wives. The offspring of these unions were the Nephilim, giants born of forbidden knowledge. Enoch describes the Watchers as teaching humanity metallurgy, astronomy, and biology, technologies suspiciously advanced for the era. If taken as literal accounts, these descriptions begin to resemble the acts of a superior civilization seeding and modifying life. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerian records of the Anunnaki go further. These beings, said to have come from the sky and ruled over mankind, were not described as metaphorical deities. They had ranks, family hierarchies, duties, and even disputes. Ancient clay tablets detail a story in which humans were created by splicing the essence of the Anunnaki with primitive earth creatures to form a labor force. The purpose was clear: gold mining. The methods described in these texts bear eerie similarities to modern genetic techniques: extractions, mixtures, gestation chambers, and prototype failures. Zecharia Sitchin, one of the most well-known proponents of this theory, interpreted Sumerian texts to suggest that humans were bioengineered around 200,000 years ago by a race from a planet called Nibiru. His translations and conclusions have been widely criticized, but some of his source material, ancient tablets describing surgical procedures and gene manipulation, remains an open puzzle. Critics argue he misinterpreted the language. Supporters argue mainstream archaeology refuses to even look. Even in South America, echoes of these ideas persist. In the legends of the Inca and pre-Incan civilizations, references are made to the Viracochas, beings with glowing skin and immense knowledge who arrived from the sea and altered the native people. The Nazca lines, vast geoglyphs only visible from the sky, are often cited as potential landing indicators. But others believe they were a message meant to be seen by those above, carved into the earth not as worship, but as communication. In the Pacific, Easter Island's oral histories speak of the Long Ears, a race said to have engineered and controlled the island's massive stone statues with sound or knowledge lost to time. Whether mythical or historical, these stories describe humans being taught or changed by external forces. The theme is consistent. We were shaped not just culturally but biologically by those who came from elsewhere. While mainstream science demands hard evidence, DNA sequences, artifacts, or technological remnants, the supporters of these theories argue that we're already holding the evidence. It's encoded in our bodies, carved into stone, and hidden in the myths that have outlived their tellers. Whether these are the dreams of early imagination or the fragments of ancient memory is a question that remains open and deeply unsettling. If the human genome carries signs of engineering, intentional or not, then the implications stretch far beyond anthropology. It would mean our species is not merely the result of blind evolution, but part of a larger design, perhaps even a plan. This possibility forces a re-evaluation of nearly every foundational assumption in biology, theology, and cosmology. It reframes humanity not as the pinnacle of chance, but as a creation with purpose, direction, and possibly expectation. And if we were designed, it suggests the presence of a designer. But who or what that might be remains hidden in the shadows of prehistory. The very notion of genetic authorship leads into philosophical territory as much as scientific. It implies intent, and with intent, a motive. Was the creation of Homo sapiens a project, a solution, an experiment? In the ancient narratives that describe the makers of man, motives vary. The Sumerian Anunnaki sought labor. The Watchers of Enoch sought companionship. In other traditions, such as Hinduism, humanity is birthed from cosmic cycles, manifestations of divine consciousness unfolding through time. Even if stripped of mysticism, these accounts still suggest that we are the product of external forces operating with a kind of will. In modern times, researchers like Dr. Gary Nolan and others investigating anomalous biological materials have quietly acknowledged that some discoveries challenge known models of biology and inheritance. These whispers in the scientific community, though rarely public, suggest that our understanding of DNA may still be incomplete, not just in complexity, but in origin. The idea that DNA might carry not only biological instructions, but embedded information, signals, codes, or even symbolic language, has been raised by fringe biologists and information theorists alike. Symbolically, this transforms DNA into more than a chemical sequence. It becomes a message, one that has waited, silently replicating across millennia until we develop the tools to read it. The double helix, in this sense, is not just a structure, but a script, and if it is a script, then it must have an author. This perspective reshapes how we view myth, religion, and even destiny. Perhaps ancient civilizations weren't worshipping gods in the modern sense, but remembering them. Perhaps their monuments, rituals, and oral traditions were not primitive attempts to understand nature, but encoded memories, echoes of contact and creation. What if the pyramids, the megaliths, the star alignments were not mere architecture or superstition, but part of a conversation we've forgotten how to finish? It also reframes our place in the universe. If we are the result of genetic engineering by an advanced intelligence, whether alien, interdimensional, or something else, then the question is no longer whether we are alone. The question becomes, where are they now? Did they leave? Did they stay hidden? Or are they watching, waiting for us to reach a level of awareness that allows us to understand who we are and why we were made? In this light, humanity is not at the end of its story, but at the beginning of its awakening. The tools of our creators may lie not in orbit or beneath the sands, but within us, in the very structure of what makes us human. And with each new discovery, each anomaly, and each breakthrough in genetics, we inch closer to decoding the message we've carried since the dawn of our kind. Patterns across the ancient world suggest that if there was a moment of creation or intervention, it wasn't isolated. From Sumer to Mesoamerica, from the Indus Valley to the Nile, civilizations emerged rapidly and with staggering similarities. Architectural precision, celestial knowledge, and a deep fixation on the stars. The recurring theme of beings descending from the sky, teaching humanity, and then vanishing into legend isn't regional, it's global. This synchronicity has led many to theorize that if genetic engineering or intervention occurred, it may have happened at multiple sites, perhaps in parallel, guided by a shared template. The sudden appearance of advanced societies with no clear developmental path mirrors the genetic leap seen in the fossil record. In both cases, biological and cultural, there is an absence of transitional evidence. Instead, there is emergence, full form, full function. Across the Pacific, Polynesian origin myths speak of star ancestors who came down from the heavens and created the first humans from light and water. In the Americas, the Hopi tell of the ant people, mysterious, benevolent beings who helped humanity survive past cataclysms and may have altered them to endure future ones. In Africa, the Zulu traditions reference sky gods called the Nomo, amphibious beings who came from Sirius and created life on Earth. These are not isolated beliefs. They are cultural echoes, different voices but the same underlying song. Even the concept of a global flood, present in dozens of civilizations, is often tied to the reconfiguration or purification of humanity. In some traditions, the flood is not a punishment but a reset, an act performed by higher beings to cleanse genetic corruption or restart the human lineage. If literal, the flood myth suggests cyclical intervention, moments in which the creators return to adjust the course of human development. Modern genetic research may be catching up to these stories. The Human Genome Diversity Project, mapping isolated populations, has uncovered genetic lineages that appear suddenly and inexplicably in regions with no historical migration paths. Ancient DNA extracted from human remains in Siberia, Australia, and the Amazon has revealed markers that do not correspond to any known migratory pattern. In some cases, the genetic divergence is so great that it has prompted quiet re-evaluation of how and where early humans travelled. Some researchers now propose that early humanity may have had multiple origin points, independent seedings across the globe, rather than a single evolutionary cradle in Africa. This hypothesis, while controversial, aligns eerily with ancient myths describing separate creation events for different peoples, often attributed to different gods or beings with unique characteristics. Even structures on Earth seem to hint at a coded message shared between ancient builders and whatever, or whoever, inspired them. The mathematical constants encoded into the Great Pyramid of Giza, the star alignments of Teotihuacan, the advanced acoustic properties of ancient chambers in Malta and Peru, all point to knowledge that seems far ahead of its time, or perhaps gifted by something outside of it. In this broader view, humanity is not a linear story, but a layered one, an overlapping series of interventions, resets, and revelations. Each culture remembers a piece of the whole, and within those fragments may lie a truth so profound that it changes how we see ourselves not just as individuals, but as a species woven into a much older, more complex cosmic narrative. If the story of our origin is encoded in myth, embedded in DNA, and scattered in stone across the world, then our task is not simply to uncover the truth, but to recognize it when we see it. The pieces are there. Genetic anomalies that defy evolutionary pacing, civilizations that rise too fast, too fully formed, legends that speak with strange precision about beings who came from elsewhere and reshaped the earth, reshaped us. These are not isolated puzzles. They are threads in a forgotten design, one that might point to who we are and why we're here. The implications stretch beyond history. If humanity was designed, then human nature may not be as fixed as we assume. Free will, consciousness, morality, these could be features, not defaults. Are we fulfilling a purpose encoded long ago, or have we drifted from it? Are we the end result, or merely a prototype? These questions carry weight not just in science, but in philosophy, ethics, and identity. The mystery of ancient genetic manipulation forces us to confront the possibility that our makers, if they existed, were not gods in the spiritual sense, but intelligent forces with the tools to create and abandon worlds. And if they abandoned us, why? Were we a failed experiment? Were we meant to evolve further before contact resumed? Or are they still here, silent and watching? These questions aren't just speculative. They emerge from the collision of two powerful trends: our deepening ability to understand the genome, and our rediscovery of stories that have waited dormant for us to mature enough to hear them clearly. The double helix may be more than a structure. It might be a signature, a message, or a key. The oldest texts describe gods descending in fire, in thunder, or in beams of light. But if those were ships, not clouds, if those were technologies, not miracles, then we've misread the oldest chapters of our story. The Tower of Babel, the Tree of Life, the forbidden fruit of knowledge. These may be metaphors for something closer to scientific intervention than moral caution. Perhaps we were never cast out of Eden. Perhaps we were released, set loose to learn, to evolve, to remember. This mystery does not offer comfort. It does not provide certainty, but it offers something deeper, a reason to question, to seek, to reassemble the fragments of what came before us. Maybe our species wasn't shaped by time alone, but by design. Not a divine plan, not random chance, but an intelligence with its own history, its own motives, and its own blueprint for life. In the end, we are left with more questions than answers. But perhaps that is the point. If we were designed to discover, to wonder, and to seek out truth, then every mystery is part of that purpose. And the mystery of our own beginning, the question of whether we were made by hands not of this world, may be the first truth we must rediscover in order to understand everything else. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of the Ancient Mysteries podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you would like to support the show, subscribe to Ancient Mysteries on Spotify. Subscribe now.